For this video, we're going to talk about family of functions, their names, their graphs, and their equations. For this set, we're going to look at graphs. Here's the 6 family of functions you need to know. Linear, quadratic, exponential, absolute value, cube root, and square root. These are not what we would call the parent functions. The parent functions are when h and k are both 0. These parent functions are moved, but you can still see the overall function. So we're going to name them. Anything that looks like a v is going to be absolute value. So we are going to name this first one absolute value. Okay, it's kind of easy. Value starts with a V. It looks like a V. There's one down. Next one. If it just kind of starts out of nowhere and goes hard to the right, it's just kind of like it has an end and then goes out of the picture. We call this one square root. Square root. You could also call this radical. We typically call that one square root. Okay. Now one that looks like a square root that matches up with another square root upside down, we would call this one cube root. Cube root is what we would name this one. It's kind of like a square root and then an upside down square root attached to it. Okay, it's a really good strategy to cross off the names after you name them as well. If it looks like a U, or what we would call a parabola, we call this a quadratic. I'm going to intentionally make the U big and the Q small to make it look more like quadratic, so you can see the U and the U. Our next one is a straight line. Okay, the only straight line we've really got here, we call this linear. Okay, we've graphed and solved linear equations a lot, so that can help us out. And the last one would be exponential. Exponential kind of goes flat for a while and then sharply increases. That would be considered exponential. Those are what the graphs look like, and they're matching names. Now let's look at equations. It says name the functions based on the equation. We've got 6 names: linear, quadratic, square root, cube root, exponential, absolute value. Those are our 6 choices. I'm going to match them to their functions here. The first one, if it's got this little check mark and goes over top and does not have a 3 in it, this one would be square root. This first one would be square root. The second one, if it's squared, okay, it's not square root, anything to the second power, we call this a quadratic. This one will be considered quadratic. This third one here kind of has parentheses. It looks a little different. It doesn't have like a 3 or an exponent or these walls. We call this one's just linear. It's sort of our basic equation, linear. The next one has absolute value bars. Well, if it has absolute value bars, we call this one absolute value. The next one has an x as its exponent, so we call this one exponential. When the x is an exponent, we call it exponential. And the last one has the same look as a square root except for a 3. We call that cube root. That's how those work. The next part of the video that we're going to talk about is how these would move. There's certain things. Each of our functions have what's called like a vertex form. So y equals 2 parentheses x minus h plus k. H is always what's inside. Okay. H is the number inside the parentheses, and it lies to you. So if it says inside the parentheses right here like -3, that's actually meaning +3. H moves left and right. That's how H moves, left and right. So this would be moving right 3. This one will be moving right 1. This will be moving right 2 because they're all subtracting inside the parentheses. Now you can't really see the parentheses here, but they mean to be parentheses underneath the square root. So this would be moving, since it says plus, I actually go the opposite way. I would go left 2. This one says plus 1 inside the parentheses. That means I would go left 1. The next thing is k. K is the number outside the parentheses. It tells the truth. And that moves up and down. So we're just going to make some arrows and talk about how things move here. Okay. This first one, this would be moving left 2 because it is subtracting 2 inside the parentheses. Here I don't see any parentheses on this quadratic, so it's outside of it. This would be moving down 6. 2 is part of the linear function, so 2 is not how it moves. The 3 and the 4 are how this moves. Since it's subtracting inside, that means go right 3, and then it also has a k value. 3 is the h, 4 is the k, so it should also move up 4. For absolute value inside these parentheses, it's moving 1 to the left, since it's adding inside. For y, it's subtracting this mini 2 up here, which means it would be moving right 2, and then since it's a positive 4 outside, it tells the truth, it would be moving up 4, the graph would be. Cube root. Subtracting inside means to move right 1, and then it says outside k tells the truth, say plus 10, this one's going to go up 10. Use this video to help guide you in learning about family of functions.